Good evening, everyone. Hi, Charlene. Hi, Campaign Terrain. And hi, Tim. Welcome back.
Good evening. Glad to see you. Hopefully, we're going to be here the entire time tonight.
Yeah, the people responsible for last time's interruption have been appropriately keel hauled and made to walk the plank. Twice.
Excellent. That's good news.
Okay, so
So, how you been? Been a
uh,
busy summer?
uh, it would have been if I had the energy to do anything. It's been so hot that I couldn't even think properly.
Yeah, there are some advantages to not living in the Mediterranean,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. What about you? How have you been?
Busy. Yeah, it's been a really busy summer work-wise. Pirate stuff, kids archaeology, making TV for schools. That's all bonkers. Trying to fit hobby in making models and that it's kind of a yeah. It's just juggling balls or spinning plates or do something. I need another me, basically. I've got too much I want to do. But yeah, it's all good. Good busy.
So what have you been working on? As in
Um,
miniature-wise?
yeah, well, model wise, hobby wise, it's been pretty tricky. I've now got my 2000 AD table to the point where we can play games on that, and we started to actually figure out playing games and how the rules work. And my problem is I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to these kind of things, I suppose. A scenery snob. And I like to play games when I've got everything sorted out. I don't like playing games without painted figures these days, and I like to have painted tables. And so when you haven't got all that, it doesn't kind of work for me really in the same kind of way. So we finally got to the point where he says trying to find a picture of a Judge Dredd table. That's never going to happen on here. I like to get to the point where we've got everything right. So we had our first game of that, which is kind of cool. And then I'm building Carnivale buildings at the moment. I'm in the middle of making a video at the moment, which was building TT Combat MDF Carnivale buildings. Because again, I want to get something on the table so we can play. We went to Colours last week. The Newbury and Reading Wargamers show took a big B&B game there and won best in show there from that point of view, which was very satisfying. I was very happy with that. That was all my London board, Lunden board. And that was really cool. It was a really nice day. We met so many people, so busy. Talking hobby, talking models, playing the games. And I didn't get to go and do any shopping until we won, and then I had to go and get the prize was cases from KR cases, so that was kind of cool. So
Oh, nice.
because you can never have too many figure cases, can you? So
Oh, yeah, for sure.
yeah, so it's all good. And then yesterday I was at in Nottingham in the Lead Belt. I was invited up to go to the Warlord Open Day for their big launch for Bolt Action 3 and other stuff. And the Bolt Action stuff was cool, but it's not really my bag. I mean, I love all toy soldiers, always have done. So yeah, going to the home of all these things is really cool. But yeah, Just Dread stuff, bits and pieces there, and getting to meet the names behind the faces behind the names that you talk to on email, that kind of thing. Chatting with a few other influencers because I don't spend a lot of time watching other people's YouTube channels and things, so I don't really know what goes on in the kind of like the rest of YouTube land. Um, and there's some of these guys, they've got huge channels and amazing followings because they're all making videos about 40K and various other bits and pieces. So they've got tens of thousands of subscribers, and you don't have to put up a 90-second video with Henry Cavill on it saying custodies and they get 700,000 views, so it's like they're totally different ball game to what I do because I keep playing niche kind of games. But yeah, it was a really interesting day. So yeah, it's and then I'm trying to get sucked loads of work stuff on. It's September, so obviously I'm preparing for Christmas. And we got Father Christmases across London this winter, and also Halloween stuff. And I'm actually having a fortnight off. My wife and I are going to Disney World in Florida in a couple of weeks' time for a fortnight, and I'm going to go and hang out in Galaxy's Edge. So it's
Oh, lovely.
so I've got to get all of Halloween sorted out before I go away, because we go away on the 8th of October. We're back on the 22nd, and I go to the Halloween event I'm doing on the 24th. So everything's got to be in place before I go for my whole team. So
Yeah, makes sense.
yeah, busy. And with my other hand, I'm I'm gonna paint some models and make some new scenery. I think Necromunda stuff might be coming.
Okay. Always nice to
Only
see.
because I found a bunch of stuff when I was going through a box yesterday, going, "Oh, that's what I meant to do." Yeah. So
Is this the
now
kind
it's
of
lying around.
books? Is this the kind of
Yeah, yeah.
books where you've had buried for 15 years and you say, ah, that's where that went.
Oh no, it's actually my problem now is I'm getting old and I've got a post-COVID brain nowadays, and I keep forgetting things. So I keep coming across kits or individual models going, "I must have bought that for a reason." Can't think of what the bloody reason was. I mean, but I've got it. So yeah. So these things all kind of like sat there all on the desk at the same time, going, "Oh, that right, okay, yeah, I'm going to build that next." So
I see that Tina Martins has joined us. Hi, Tina. Okay, so we promised everyone that we'd be talking about pirates, so maybe we should get the ball rolling on that. So,
let's do it.
do you have a favorite pirate?
Pirates wise, yeah, I've got a couple. I think at the moment, my the guy I'm interested in the most of all at the moment is Henry Every.
Ah, the
Uh,
Pirate King. Okay.
the Pirate King, the arch pirate. Purely because the shows that we do in the summer for English Heritage are based around him. The problem is in the UK, there are lots of problems with doing pirate shows and pirate stuff, and that is, of course, that Hollywood pirates kind of like impinges on reality. It's very hard to, for me, the unpicking of reality and myth is half the fun. But doing pirate reenactments in the UK, there are a few groups, but most people who do pirate stuff, it's far more cosplay. So we're far more interested in accurate 18th century representation of maritime life and coastal life and that kind of thing. And but when I was approached to consult and do these shows for English Heritage, it was very much a case of, right, they wanted authentic Golden Age of Piracy events. And my first response was, well, that happened 5,000 miles over there, actually, sitting in my office going, it doesn't really happen in the English Channel. There were a couple of pirates during the Golden Age of Piracy active in the English Channel. An Irish guy called Philip Roach, who was, but he was a really insignificant pirate. His modus operandi was to steal ships from. He'd be on board a ship. He'd wait for the captain to go and use the heads, and then he would go and along there, and mysteriously the captain would fall over the side of the boat, and then he would end up stealing it and kind of like sailing it away.
I mean, it
Which is
still
kind
counts as
of,
piracy, kinda.
yeah, yeah, it's definitely piracy. And then he'd take it. So he took a ship from Dartmouth and sailed it across to France and emptied it and kind of like filled it up and sailed it. And he was a bit more of a kind of wheeler dealer and a pirate. And but you can't make a family show that people are going to sit and watch in an arena around there. And the
Yeah,
same,
Grand Theft Galleon doesn't really sound very
no,
familiar, really.
and it's also the thing with piracy for EH is the fact that again, look, you want to do a piracy show, but we're going to be in the grounds of a castle and not on a ship. You know, it's kind of tricky to do. So I went with Henry Every because he disappears in 1696 and nothing is known anymore is known of him. So you've got this kind of, we set everything in a real kind of world. It's quite immersive, and my crew, but the living historians who work with me are top notch when it comes to 18th century life and 18th century sailing and piracy and various other things. But yeah, we can play around with the story because Henry Every is yeah, we don't know what happened to him. So the stuff we do in our living history camps is full on proper 18th century life, and then the stuff we do in the arena shows is kind of pirate panto, really. You know, it's because a good friend of mine, Dr. Ed Fox, who's just the world's one of the leading experts on pirates in the world. Isn't a big fan of pirate reenactment these days, purely because he says, how do you square away all the really, really unpleasantness that pirates, well, you know, you've got psychopathic murderers, you've got gang rape, you've got all these kind of things that, and how do you kind of make that all right?
And you make that
Uh,
family friendly, yeah?
It's not very family friendly, no. Although I quite have to have those conversations with people on a one-to-one kind of basis about, how unpleasant these people are. But when you're doing a show, it's got to be swashbuckling, and there's got to be gunfire, and there's got to be boos and cheers and parades and stuff. So Henry Every's become the focus of that. It's a fascinating story anyway, the whole kind of thing, and how it happened, and how he nearly brought down the British Empire before it even started. And so yeah, that's kind of cool. And it's and he happens really, he's 20 years before the main Golden Age of Piracy, so 1695. Most of the pirates that you name and can think of are really 1715, 1725 or so. So
Yeah, so absolutely an innovator in the field.
yeah, yeah. Suits my kind of age as well, and size and puffiness, because I get to be Henry Every. Uh, in disguise, mind you. I'm in disguise. I'm a strictly legitimate businessman with a tax-free import and export business, going under the name of Sir Henry Goodfellow. So I'm the good guy.
Oui.
Yeah, because it's my show.
Okay, so you were talking about debunking and picking bits from, truth from Hollywood, basically. Is there any kind
Yeah.
of particular trope that keeps coming up, or that you find particularly annoying, or?
Okay. Well, it's easy to say what isn't. When you think of pirates, if you think of Hollywood pirates, or if you picture a pirate in your mind, um, and you think of a trope, chances are it's not a real thing. So, eye patches, peg legs, and hooks, not a real thing. We can get onto why in a moment. They don't wear earrings. They're not all adorned in skull and crossbones all over the place. They didn't make people walk the plank. Parrots sitting on the shoulder of a pirate is not a thing. They didn't tend to bury treasure. There are no treasure maps. Everything that it features in popular culture about pirates is pretty much fiction. Because, again, if you're going to make a story about pirates, I mean, the interesting thing is that it's only recently pirates have become completely skewed and are now the goodies.
Oh yeah, good point.
Uh, since the 80s, really, and I suppose 90s, I can't remember what it was, when Cutthroat Island was a film that was made, and it's about, you've got good pirates and bad pirates, and and of course, Pirates of the Caribbean, where you've got a bunch of pirates who turn out to be the goodies, and the authorities are the bad guys. Pirates in the past were often portrayed as the baddies. The pirates in Treasure Island are the bad guys.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so there's this. They're so very popular, but yeah, so much of it is has just been woven in one way or another into kind of like popular culture. Certainly, what they look like. I mean, because the problem is nowadays, if you go online and you search for what do pirates wear, you'll just get vast amounts of fancy dress. And getting people, and that's fine. And don't get me wrong, I have no problem at all with people going to events dressed up like pirates. It's cool. There are a lot of groups in the UK, lots of events, pirate festivals, all over the world, and you'll get people dressed up in the same kind of way, and it's extremely flamboyant and big hats and feathers and skulls and crossbones, absolutely everywhere. But that hasn't got anything to do with being a pirate in the 18th century. And nowadays, the other thing that we get a lot of is people who now want to put their 21st century values onto pirates and try and make them even cooler than they actually were. So their approaches to things like being democratic, and that you'll get people who think you will always talk about the fact that every time they captured a slave ship, they freed all the slaves. It really didn't. They didn't invent the kind of democracy thing, and they voted there. Sometimes they voted for their captain. Sometimes they voted on different issues. But yeah, it wasn't their idea. They brought those ideas with them from wherever they come from before. So pirates it was quite common in the fishing industry in the 18th century to vote for stuff on board ship.
All right.
And so guys who become pirates and come from fishing, they carried on doing the thing that they
They're
did
just used to it.
previously.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, that's what we do. in the same way that kind of like the equal shares of treasure. On a fishing vessel, it's often common that the captain got a double share to the other guys because he was making the big decisions, but everybody else got an equal share because that's what they did. So you get this kind of translation of their other experiences and get stuck into piracy. So they weren't this. There's a kind of almost a movement now that's about making them sound like they were this libertarian kind of free floating society, thumbing their nose at the kingdoms of the world, and yeah, they're all out there, all and I just don't believe it was like that at all. Actually, quite a lot of them were what they actually wanted. Well, their main motivation was to just not be the scum of the earth anymore.
In what sense?
A lot of them were desperately poor people,
Hmm.
and they wanted to make a fast buck. And the quickest way they thought they could do that was by high seas robbery. And in fact, the pirates of today, because of course piracy is a problem that's plagued mankind ever since ships have been sailed across the sea. The pirates of today, they're mostly motivated by desperate poverty and seeing these big, easy targets that they can kind of like nowadays capture and ransom and whatever else. And they're the pirates actually doing the dirty work are being manipulated often nowadays by somebody else, but they still stand to make money and they can rise out of poverty. And I think that Henry Every, going back to Henry Every, he kind of did that. People like to think that that's what he did. We it's very hard to equate how much money he made, because they captured one ship, the Gangy Sawi, and they made so much money from this ship that he retires. And there are some people who like to think that, in some ways, the realist in me reckons he probably pissed it all up the wall and died in poverty. But the romantic in me likes to go with the story that he settled down somewhere and lived a quiet life as a country squire somewhere with his pirate fortune.
Yeah,
And yeah, lots of other people who came after him, that's what they wanted to do. Step out of society, make a load of money, reinsert themselves into society, and no longer be, the scum of the earth.
I see that Dirty Basement Train has joined us. Hi, Lawrence. And the campaigner is saying that another common trope is Hollywood only shows British pirates and only in the Mediterranean. Now,
Yeah,
the Mediterranean is a terrible place to do piracy, and I mean we have a lot of corsairing over here, not that much piracy.
yeah. We get these kind of things, and we also then get lots of stuff where everything gets amalgamated together.
Yeah,
So the Barbary Corsairs, although they're still active around about the period of the Golden Age of Piracy, and they're raiding all the way out of the Mediterranean, up the Iberian coast, and across the southern part of Ireland and into southern part of England at times.
well,
They're not the
if I'm
same.
not mistaken, the Barbary pirates are the reason the U.S. has a navy in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, they go and get they go the US go and sort them out. Yeah, and then and they're around for lots of different periods, and then people also get. We now throw all these words around at the same time, like to mean the same thing. So pirate, buccaneer, for example, buccaneers are different to the pirates of the Golden Age. The buccaneers really come earlier in the 17th century, and people like Henry Morgan, he has a huge force at his disposal, but actually most of what he does is on land. They're these
Okay.
kind of like they're based out in the Caribbean. They attack Spanish forts. They go into places like Panama and other places, and they're very active on land. And they're slightly different to the Golden Age of pirates.
So it's more like a private army kind of thing rather than a
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and of course then there are lots of other people who talk about much earlier pirates, which of course you could do as well. Um, the Francis Drakes and Walter Raleighs and of John Hawkins of Queen Elizabeth I and Granny O'Malley, the Irish pirate lady. But they're a different period again. So and it's and of course only the Spanish considered Drake and Raleigh to be pirates. Everybody in England was quite happy with them doing what they were doing, and they were
I mean,
Good, honest.
they were kind of still working under a government license, if I'm not mistaken, no?
Yeah, yeah, they got a letter of marque. They're allowed
Yeah.
to. It's fine. Yeah. As long as you don't attack the Spanish, as long as you don't, And there's a very thin line between being a privateer and a pirate in some cases, And a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
pirates in the Golden Age start off as privateers. William Kidd is a perfect example. And yeah, he's another interesting guy. William Kidd is the only pirate who we know in the Golden Age of Piracy actually buried treasure. Actually was involved in burying any treasure. But of course, he tells the governor of Gardiner's Island where it was buried immediately, where it is, and he then gets caught by the Royal Navy, and the treasure gets dug up and used as evidence in his trial.
Oh, no.
And then he's executed in 1701. And then actually this summer we did an event. Let's see, yeah, cool. Where have I gone? Oh yeah, see, here we are. This summer we did an event for the old Royal Naval College in Greenwich, which
Oh,
is
nice.
the home of the Royal Navy, or certainly the home of it's like it was the hospital for veterans, and the coolest thing at the old Royal Naval College is a room called the Painted Hall, which if I can make this actually, if I go in there and open that and then share this. This is me. Where are we? That's
Yeah, I see
me in
it.
the Painted Hall this summer. And the cool thing about this, and the whole room, it's often described as like England's Sistine Chapel, if you like.
Okay.
The whole building is quite extraordinary. The inside of this thing. This is where the Navy veterans ate dinner a lot of the time. And this whole hall was painted in the building. The Old Royal Naval College was founded in about 1706. So it's 5 years after William Kidd was executed. And the cool thing that I discovered this year, while we were talking to people about busting pirate myths, and we were talking about pirate treasure and William Kidd's treasure, is that William Kidd's treasure paid for all of the painting in this building.
No way. All right.
Queen Anne Queen Anne gave it to the Royal Navy, or the proceeds to the Royal Navy. It's listed as Queen Anne's gift, and that's what painted for the actual paid for the painting of this
Okay.
hall. And we were doing a show in there. We do a show called Know Your Enemy, which is about pirate myths, and the last bit we do is talk about pirate treasure. So I had 200 or 300 people who sat on the floor, who are all kind of looking at the ceiling of this incredible painting, and we're talking to them about William Kidd's kind of treasure paid for all this. And it's the only case of actual buried pirate treasure in that period. But of course, that's only according to historians as opposed to the History Channel, which would have to think that there's treasure buried all over the gaff, and especially on Oak Island. Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. Yeah, but
aliens probably as well.
yeah, and in the pyramids, obviously.
Yeah,
You've got to have the pyramids and possibly the sharks. But yeah, I mean, buried treasure is such a good story that it's hard to put it down, is it?
every pirate story, it's got to have buried treasure
Oh,
in
yeah.
it, and it's got to come from somewhere. The At the other end of the Golden Age of Piracy, to Henry Every, who's this guy who makes all this money and disappears, we get the most successful pirate of the Golden Age. He's a guy called Richard Taylor, sometimes mistakenly called John Taylor, who was another pirate, and he hung out with he was partnered with a French pirate called Oliver Lavassier, also known as Le Bousse, the Buzzard. And Lavassier is interesting because he's got a really quite a long career compared to most pirates. He's crops up for about 8 to 10 years. Most pirate careers are over in 18 months, 2 years. It is live fast, die
Oh,
young
yeah.
kind of stuff.
I didn't realize it was
And
that short. Yeah.
yeah, it's and I mean some pirates, Anne Bonny and Mary Read, the very famous female pirates, their career was 2 months exactly. And was nowhere near as cool as the stories. But Richard Taylor and Lavassier, they do a very similar thing to Henry Every. They capture this ship that's sailing from Mecca back to India. They make a vast fortune on all their crews. Richard Taylor takes his money and goes to Panama and buys himself a pardon. So he's now legit, and he's not, because the thing with Henry Every is the fact that if Henry Every did go and take all his money and live a quiet life. He was always a wanted man. The reward on Henry Every's head was £500. The reward for Blackbeard 20 years later was only ever £100. So Henry Every was considered at the time absolute arch pirate, and Blackbeard is the pirate that everybody can name.
I'm guessing that 500 is would be something around the millions in today's money, I can kind of think.
It's certainly tens of thousands of pounds or
Okay.
hundreds of thousands. Yeah, it's an awful lot of money. A well-paid guy might be earning 40 or 50 pounds a year. So, say 10 years would be a lot of money. And you get, so Richard Taylor buys a pardon, goes to Cuba, buys a plantation, and settles down as a legitimate businessman. And 20 years later, in the 1740s, he's still in the record. He owns his own ships now, and he's kind of like, whereas the French guy, Lavoisier, he tries to do the same thing. But the French authorities won't have it, and he gets captured and put on trial and found guilty. And it's said that at his execution, when he stood out on the dock, he threw out an item into the crowd which had a set of instructions on it. He literally was supposed to have said, follow those instructions and you'll find my treasure. Which, of course, if you go to Madagascar now, you could probably buy that very set of authentic instructions on pretty much every street corner. In fact, I seem to remember a Top Gear special episode with James May getting very excited about trying to find Labousse's treasure, digging it all over beaches on Madagascar. And it's, but his wasn't a map anyway. It was a pig pen cipher. It was an 18th century cipher that was, but no, never been found. It's definitely not there. The guy probably, just spent it all. You have to. Really.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they have any long-term retirement prospects or anything. It's just,
No, again, it was all part of this kind of like live fast, die young kind of culture, and of course, a lot of the time, pirates didn't even get actual treasure because they're attacking merchant ships.
So they're getting cargo rather than not going. Yeah,
they're taking commodities, so tea, silk, rum, gunpowder, sugar, slaves, spices, and all these things have to be sold and fenced off. So you do get in some TV and Hollywood things, you do get some form of things like black sails in the last few years.
I love that show.
It's great. I'm all right with black sails. I shout at the TV. Do you shout at the TV?
Not usually, no.
When it gets it wrong,
There are some cases with some. Sorry, there are some cases with some documentaries, not with black sails, because I mean it's entertainment. It's not
exactly. Yeah, well, it took me a long time.
History Channel I can't even watch anymore, though.
Yeah, it took me a long time to get around to stop shouting at the telly on dramas that get things wrong. And but some bits of black sails, and because black sails is about Long John Silver and Captain Flint, who are, of course, fictional characters, and all they've done is try to weave in real stuff. It kind of works, but certainly the idea that a place like Port Royal and later Tortuga are places where you have to take your stuff, and you had to have fences who legitimized it and sold it and kind of cleaned up your money. I mean, all of that was completely true. That had to happen, because otherwise your pirates are sat on barrels of molasses. Great, but and sometimes they were, even when they captured ships, they were even after far more basic things than that. There are records of pirates looking. The first thing they did on one occasion, one crew captured the ship, and the first thing they wanted to do was take everybody's shoes, because they'd been out of sea for ages. The shoes were absolutely rotten and falling apart, and the first thing they wanted to do was replace the shoes, because you don't come across shoes easily when you're sailing around the Caribbean. So shoes and hats.
Okay, I remember that when Stede Bonnet's crew was sailing back, they were sorry, I believe from England to back to the Caribbean. They did stop other ships and steal their food, because they didn't have any supplies of their own. But I'm used to reading mostly about corsairing in the Mediterranean. The logistics of corsairing across an ocean are very, very different.
Yeah, it is. A lot of that stuff gets left out of all the movies as well. It's great when we get asked questions about those kind of things. Of course, I do a lot of stuff in schools give kids stories to write, and we write pirate stories. And I love it when the kids get beyond the pirate stuff, and it's often the kids who ask the really practical questions, like, how do you go to the loo on a sailing ship? Uh, which is one of those things again. Right, okay. Well, now as you've started, you end up having conversations about tow rags and various other things, and how you wipe your bottom when you're on a sailing ship and you're pooing over the side of the boat. It's great. Um, Brilliant conversations to have with an 8-year-old or an 80-year-old, having come to that. And strangely, Hollywood and everybody else, they kind of gloss over that kind of side of things. You never have to take that into consideration. Or war games rules come to that, because I like pirate war game rules too, but they never ask about how your little lead figures go to the loo on board the ship.
Okay, I mean, when it comes to tabletop war games, I would guess that's fair because you don't really worry about them going to the bathroom in the middle of a battle. If
I'd
it
be
was,
going
if,
to, I'd,
eh,
I'd totally be
Second.
going to the bathroom in the middle of a battle. Me, I'd be like, I'm all for putting on a good show, but I think I'd be absolutely rubbish in the actual middle of a battle. So I'd be desperately be going to the loo in the middle of a battle.
Yeah, now on the other hand, if it was a tabletop role-playing game, then yeah, that would be a valid question to have in there. Oh, well, okay. Thanks, Cross. So, Cross is saying that £500 in 1750 is worth 4.5 million to 7 million today.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'd find, if I could, the one thing that actually is really, really difficult to do is to actually take a value from 1725 and put it in today's money. But yeah, we're talking an awful lot of money, one way or another. Big values. There are so many different indexes and things that affect the value of stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They wear brown pants. Nice. Yeah. Yeah, they are certainly stained. A lot of stains on their clothes, from tar. It would have been definitely tar. Yeah. Um, but yeah, it's an interesting thing to do. But there's no easy way to calculate value of that kind of stuff. But so I've seen, so for the amount of money that Henry Every captured and made himself, I've seen things estimated to be anything from a couple of £100,000 in today's money up to tens of millions of pounds. It's and in the end, I think you just have to settle for the fact that the world's a different place now, and but it was a vast sum of money one way or another. I certainly would have, a £500 reward certainly would have turned heads.
I mean,
Um,
whatever the amount was, it was enough to destabilize an economy, basically. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly the amount of money, the value that they took off the Gangi Sari was enough to have the Mughal of India nearly kind of like kick the East India Company out of India right at the get-go. So from that point of view, it was a hugely significant diplomatic failure, Every, in what he was doing. And yeah, so that bit aside, and we never, you don't tend to think about those things when you're thinking about pirates and the ramifications of what they've done elsewhere. Yeah,
Yeah, good point. So, and speaking of treasure ships, again, if we go to Black Sails again, there's the Arca de
okay,
Lima, so the
yeah.
Spanish treasure ship. I believe the Spanish treasure ship was captured once by the Dutch, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there were a couple. I mean, yeah, the Spanish were still in the 1700s. By that point, they'd been busy emptying um, the South America of everything that was not bolted down, and they were still doing it. So yeah, it was still a big deal. That again, the nice thing about Black Sails is it's pegged down by a number of kind of factual bits, but then you don't let the facts get in the way of a good drama.
Oh yeah,
So
for
from
sure.
that, it's a great show. It's one of those ones where and cosplayers actually love it because they get away wear loads of sexy leather, which would have been the last thing you would have wanted to wear when you're actually on a ship in the Caribbean.
Oh god, yeah. Oh fuck, yeah. Thinking about it, I was watching a history video about it wasn't about pirates, it was about the British Army in Caribbean colonies, and the mortality rate was something out of this world. It just and I'm
Yeah.
assuming they were wearing sensible clothes and stuff like that, not leather.
They were usually always poorly supplied. They were running out of kit, and
Yeah,
Northern European types uh, back in those days, especially without modern medicines and understanding of nutrition and various other bits and pieces. Yeah, they often get being sent out to a garrison in the Caribbean was often almost like a death sentence for a lot of people. They just living out there was a very difficult thing to do to get acclimatized to it.
yeah. And I'm thinking, I mean, on board the ship, it must have been worse, no?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and this is always the thing. I mean, it's always looks kind of glamorized, and we all got this lovely idea. And pirate history, a lot of it was just grim, man. you know, I I often get asked when I'm a historical reenactments, different events, different periods, different things. You get people say to you, so would you like to have been alive in in um in the 18th century or the 16th century? And no, bottom line. Um, I like being able to go to the supermarket any day, and buy the things that I need. I like the fact that I've got a decent dentist down the road. I like the fact that my wife always talks about when she's at events, when she gets asked that kind of question, she said, "Oh, I would have died giving birth to our first kid." And I'd love to be able to see it. I'd love a time telescope to be able to look back and see how close we are in what we've learned and what we think we know. Um, and I'd like to be able to hear it and smell it, but actually live it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and being on a sailing ship in the 18th century with no fresh water and nowhere to, going using the heads, and no fresh food, and yeah, all that kind of thing. That must be ghastly. Even for wealthy people who were sailing from across in the Atlantic to the colonies or back again, you're still on board a ship where you're totally at the whim of the weather and a whole bunch of other stuff. God no, no. I like wearing the clothes. I like doing the shows. I like making the models, and writing rules for it and all that kind of thing. But and it's kind of cool, but no, not actually being there.
Actually, speaking of which, I know that 16th century sailing ships tend to be a bit on the Spartan side. On the inside, it's like the very low corridors and stuff. Was it
Yeah,
any different in the 17th?
it's the same throughout. Yeah, I'm 5'10". I'm about 175, 175 centimeters tall ish. I'm nearly as broad now. Um, and a little while ago, I was on HMS Victory
Hmm.
in Portsmouth Historic Dockyard, which of course she's a late 18th century ship. And yeah, the gun decks are I'm probably 20 centimeters too tall to be able to stand up. You're stooping all the time. Regular men, regular height will be stooping on those. So depending on the size of the vessel, yeah, you're kind of like, I'd be bumping my head all over the place. I would just be bloody miserable. By the time you put the stairs into a tall ship, this is one of the things about eye patches, which is complete nonsense. Um,
Okay, shoot.
if you Google, let's do eye patches. The eye patch is absolutely synonymous with pirates. And of course, if you Google why do pirates wear eye patches, you get a number of responses. But the most common thing you'll find is that
Wait. Let me guess. Is it for night vision?
yeah, yeah, you see the way it works, right? According to theories, and I think they tried it on something like MythBusters. I think Adam Savage had a go at kind of working on this theory to see if it worked. The theory is if you keep one eye covered up, right, which is working perfectly well, it gets used to being in the dark. And then they talk about the fact that, that would then give you an advantage when you go on board an enemy ship and you go down the stairs. Then you can uncover that eye and you'll be able to see really well and fight the guys down below decks. And I have a few issues with this. And technically, we like to call that bollocks, basically. There are a few things. First of all, if you cover up, I tend to find if I cover up this eye, right, and it works perfectly well, it tends to close. You could try and kind of keep it open, but it isn't really getting used to seeing in the dark. It's not seeing anything at all. So your eye tends to close. And the other thing, of course, is the fact that we have the human being works really well because we've got stereoscopic vision. And losing an eye tends to affect your ability to judge depth. It affects your depth perception.
Yeah.
Which
Which
will
you
make
really
you
need if you want to jump between two ships.
jump between two ships. It will be. Hang on. I've got props this evening.
Ooh.
Right. Okay. So, if you lost an eye, it will make you a terrible shot with a pistol. Okay.
Okay,
This Queen Anne pistol can't judge distances. If you've been on one of those tall ships and you've seen the staircases that do this, your depth perception for going down a set of stairs.
Because those are very narrow steps, aren't they?
It's lethal. So you don't want to do that anyway. And then my favourite bit is, hang on, I need a sword as well. So now you're a connoisseur of swords. This is my 18th century cutlass made for me by a guy called Tim Noyes, Heron Armory. Excellent weapon. So here you are. I've got to have an eye patch. Oh, sorry. All right, I'm going to close this on. All right,
Okay.
this side. Right. And then I've gone and bought my enemy ship with a sword and pistol, right? I've got my eye covered. I get to the top of the stairs to go down below deck to fight a guy down below deck. Now, the first question you have to ask is, when do I change the eye patch over? Do I change it over?
Okay. I didn't even think about that.
Do I change the eye patch over at the top before I go below decks, or do I go downstairs and then when I get to the bottom of the stairs, do I then change my eye patch over? Right, and then there's a guy down below who's already waiting for me who can already see in the dark. Right, he's acclimatized to seeing in the dark. So, and then I've got a pistol and a cutlass, and my eye, and
I didn't even think about it.
logistically speaking, it just doesn't bloody work.
Yeah.
Never mind the historical, the evidence of it all. And the evidence in this case, everything we know about the pirates, actually know about pirates, comes from historical documents. Okay, most of the first-hand accounts of Golden Age pirates come from either people who have encountered pirates, so captains of ships who they've encountered pirates and they've been let go, and they make records about it in their ship's log, and their ship's logs are now in archives usually in Britain or in America. Or we get accounts of pirates mostly from pirates and their own words, pirates when they're on trial and what they talk about and what they confess to and this kind of thing. And the other thing is, it's kind of written evidence we're after. If this was a thing, first of all, I always love this because it's kind of like always portrayed as a pirate secret, wearing an eye patch. Oh, yes, a secret thing that pirates did. Well, it wouldn't be a bloody secret, would it? Because everybody would know. If it was a thing, and this is the most important bit as far as I'm concerned, if it was a thing and it worked, the Royal Navy would have done it. Right, the Royal Navy was the biggest fighting organisation in the world at the time. It was the reason why Britain became such a vast empire, because the Royal Navy were able to do what they did. And when you became an able seaman on board a ship of His Britannic Majesty or Her Britannic Majesty, depending on when you are, you would have been issued an eye patch. There's your eye patch, and here's your set of instructions how to use your eye patch. Don't bloody lose either of them. And then when you lose your eye patch, and there'll be quite a few pictures, right, of British sailors all walking around with eye patches.
I mean, they documented literally everything else. Why not that?
and then the Royal Navy and every other big military organisation runs on paper. It runs on logistics. So there would be all over the historical record lists of eye patches in store. Requests for men needing new eye patches, and we need there'd be, and there isn't any of that.
Yeah, so probably contracts for the design of eye patches as well.
Exactly, yeah. All of that. It's just not a thing. Just wasn't a thing at all. And then when you get to it, so the only other thing you're left with is why would you cover up your eye otherwise? Okay, what's the other reason for covering up an eye? Why do people assume there's an eye patch there? Got to be because you've lost your eye, right? Or you've been blinded in your eye. So you've either got a really nasty kind of gaping wound, or you've got one of those kind of classic Hollywood white eyes with a scar running through it, this kind of thing. If you apply that logic to it, you're going to go, right, okay, so the pirate whose main weapon is fear and terror, yeah, when he comes on board your boat, if you want to intimidate somebody, what's more intimidating, an eye patch or a ghastly kind of open wound where he's, had a sword cut through it and lost an eye and the rest of it? Which is likely to scare somebody more? It's not the eye patch, is it?
Yeah.
It really isn't. So, yeah, there's no evidence for it at all whatsoever. And you have to bear in mind a little bit later in history, even the most famous one-eyed sailor of them all, Lord Admiral Horatio Nelson, right, didn't wear an eye patch. He wore a green sunshade to help his other eye, but he didn't wear an eye patch. He lost his eye, so it's just there.
Glass eye, or whatever, if I remember correctly.
So it's just one of those things. It's just not, and yeah, pirates has become mythologized. Pirates is the most mythologized bit of history, I think, of anything at all. I think it's safe to say that the Vikings come a little bit close, but not not in the way that. And again, mostly these days, thanks to TV programs like the Vikings. So everybody gets into Vikings nowadays, likes to wear kind of like mascara and kind of shave the side of their heads and
have the tribal tattoos and the yeah.
double-headed axes and Whereas with pirates, again, even things like with earrings, again, if you Google why did pirates wear earrings, because pirates are always portrayed with big golden hoopy earrings, you'll get a whole bunch of nonsense, and it's all nonsense, and it's mostly about it was to do with if your body was dumped over the side of a ship, or you were swept over the side of a ship. When your body was swept up on a foreign shore, the gold in your earring would pay for a decent Christian burial. That's probably the
top it would.
Search result. And I love that, because that's relying on a number of assumptions. That really, really is. First assumption is that the person who finds your body has had that memo, right? So they know and understand the rules.
Yeah, and even considering if you take the entire coastline of South America at the time, the odds of landing somewhere where A, you will be found, and B, will be found by a Christian, those are some very low odds.
Pretty low chance. Secondly, that it also relies on their complete honesty, and not just going, oh, look, there's a golden earring there, I'll have that, and then clearing off. Or the more to the point, if your body is, if you're buried at sea or dumped over the side, your body's thrown over the side of the boat, and pirates often would just throw dead comrades over the side of the boat, famously, because they don't want their mates to. Their bodies to be used as evidence or used as a trophy. So when Bart Roberts is killed in action against HMS Swallow, the first thing his crew do is dump his body over the side of the boat. So if your body is dumped over the side of the boat, or you're swept overboard, and after it's floated around in the Caribbean for warm waters of the Caribbean for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks,
nibbled by fish and so on, yeah.
And it's been chewed by sharks and crabs and all that kind of stuff, and it's gone bloated and rotten and horrible and swollen up, and when it gets swept up on the beach, and that good honest Christian person who knows all about the rules comes up and finds your smelly, bloated, kind of rotten corpse, they might kind of question whether it's worth that little golden earring. Because I don't think it is, frankly, I question all of that. Although my very favourite one for earrings is I found once on a website that said that pirates wore, again, it's a pirate secret, nobody else did this, it would have been a pirate thing, they wore pairs of golden earrings so they could have little bits of cord hanging from the earrings with wax earplugs. So when they shot cannons, they'd plug their ears. And it was a practical thing. And we
Right.
call that nonsense as well, So it's
No, I think
um,
the one I remember was because it was a superstition that it would make your eyesight better. I'm not sure
yeah.
what the
Also,
connection is.
now there are some people, and I'm cautious about getting onto kind of like belief systems and various other bits and pieces. There are some people who will go with that. The kind of people who are into kind of Indian or Chinese kind of um,
Like,
body systems.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah, right.
you get rid of your headache by kind of like massaging your foot and that kind of thing. That could be the most credible kind of answer, all right, your ears are attached to your eye. I don't know. But no, I mean, the facts in the end is we have to go with evidence again. God, this annoying evidence thing. And the evidence from the 18th century, the early part of the 18th century, was that I think there are two pictures, contemporary pictures of some Dutch fishermen that have got one earring, because it was fashionable at home, not because it's what fishermen did. Later on in the 18th century, there was a written record of of a guy who did have his ear pierced, encountering a Royal Naval officer, and the Royal Naval officer queried on him why he got his ear pierced. Was he actually a woman? So, and this is again written in a ship's log. So it shows how incredibly unusual it would have been, and certainly not the kind of trope that we all kind of like, all love, I'm afraid. So yeah, it's a good one. But
Okay. And thinking about the other trope that's very often associated with pirates is the prosthetic. It's either the peg leg or the hook. I'm guessing no, right?
all right, well, okay. So name a pirate with a hook for a hand.
An actual pirate, not a cartoon pirate or stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, any pirate. Name me a pirate with a hook for a hand.
The only one I can think of is Captain Hook.
Right. Okay. Captain Hook, of course, is famous for being a character in J.M. Barrie's play and then later kids' book, Peter Pan. Yeah. And name a pirate with a peg leg.
Okay, the only one I can think of is Long John Silver.
Right. Okay. In fact, in the story, he doesn't have a peg leg at all. He just has, when he loses his leg, he uses a crutch, and
Yeah,
he doesn't
okay.
have a peg leg at all. And the interesting thing with all of this is actually all of these things, the eye patch, prosthetic kind of limbs. First of all, you get we know that all of these injuries were entirely possible to happen on board a sailing ship in battle or from a maritime industrial accident. You could lose hands, legs, that kind of thing. Whipping around ropes could smack, blind you. So all of
A
this,
cable
these are
can tear your head
hazards.
off. It's yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, these are all hazards of being on board a ship. So and historically, of course, we haven't really, and men in the Navy and men in the Army weren't always particularly well looked after if they were maimed in those kind of ways or wounded in battle. And what we do have from the Golden Age of Piracy are their ships' articles, charters. In Pirates of the Caribbean, of course, there was bang on about the code. It's all in the code, and you
That
kind
big
of get the
book.
impression. Yeah, you get the impression that on board the bookshelf in every self-respected sailing ship was a kind of like a little cabinet, right, with a thing on it that said, "In case of mutiny, break glass here," and inside is a copy of the code, and that told you how to behave as a pirate. Well, and it was like the universal playbook of piracy. When
No,
you have
no.
become
Just thinking
that,
about it, I know that literacy rates were higher than many people think they were, but at the same time, it's like all the pirates being able to read a pirate code sounds like.
yeah. So that doesn't really happen, but pirates did like to live by sets of rules a lot of the time. We know this as pretty much a fact. Not all crews, not all the time. But there are bits of 13 or 14 sets of ship's articles from the Golden Age of Piracy. 9 complete sets written down. Obviously taken from interviews and kind of affidavits of pirates who are on trial. But they've got no reason to lie about these things. They talk about the rules that they live by. Some are a bit vague. And then there are others that are more complete. And probably the most famous, the most complete sets is the articles of Black Bart Roberts. And there are loads of things in those articles. Most of the ship's articles, most of the code, or the pirate code, is about keeping peace on board your ship. Most of it is about acceptable behaviour on board, because you've got a crew of goodness knows how many blokes who are hungry, angry, armed, and
predisposed to crime. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of these things are rules about how we're going to live. So they almost all universally have rules like no playing games for of cards or dice for money, right? Because somebody's going to get accused of cheating, and that's going to lead to fights. All arguments, disagreements will be settled ashore. We're not going to have fights on board the ship. When we make land, you can sort it out on the beach. You can use swords or pistols or harsh language, whatever you like. We're not going to, So there's a lot of these, and in a number of these sets of articles, you get details of what happens when you get wounded. If you lose a hand, lose an arm, lose a leg, you'll get a payout. We'll pay you. I mean, in some cases, and Bart Robertson's, I think it's something like if you lose your right arm, you get paid 800 pieces of 8. But these are retirement payments, promises. If you've lost your right arm, you're no bloody use on a ship.
Yep.
You can't load a pistol. You can't pull on ropes. You can't do anything at all. So we're going to hopefully pay you off and retire. If you lose an eye, use a leg. There is one 18th century drawing illustration of a ship's cook who's only got one leg, but which is probably where the Long John Silver idea comes from. But it was extremely unusual. The idea was that they would pay you off. Now, like modern insurance policies, there's very little evidence that anybody actually got paid out when these kind of things happen.
That's
a lot of the time, because what modern insurance companies like, they'll do bloody anything to get out of paying, won't they? And in this case, of course, to pay out 800 pieces of 8, if you lose your right arm, they've got to have made that kind of money in the first place. It's got to be there and available. But on the whole, you were a liability if you got these injuries, and your crewmates, they were bothered about you, but they didn't really need to be. You need every hand, every body on board a ship has got to be useful. So we get all of this, but then we have to say, right, where do all these things come from? Where does the tricorn hat and the big coat with the turn back sleeves, which are all popular in the 18th century, where does the eye patch and the hook hand and everything else come from? And the most likely answer is it comes from 19th century illustrators.
Okay.
Of course, in the 19th century, we get this huge increase in literacy, and what with mass printing and everything else, we get pirate stories getting written. Pirate stories, of course, are around from the mid 1720s. Captain Johnson publishes
the Life of Pirates.
The general history of pirates.
Yeah.
And of course, he's already sexing up the stories about pirates, but pirates in fiction is a 19th century thing. And you get Walter Scott writes pirate stories. Robert Louis Stevenson, of course, writes Treasure Island. Then you get J.M. Barrie writing Peter Pan. And of course, the other cool thing you get in the end of the 19th century is you start to get illustrated stories. And because they're either published in kind of like episodes in magazines, like Sherlock Holmes was in the Strand magazine, this kind of thing. So they're published in bits, and they're often illustrated. And what you get illustrators like Howard Pyle and others. They want to draw pirates, and they want to draw men in 18th century attire. Now, the only place you can go in 19th century London to see men in 18th century clothing is the London Hospital for Chelsea Pensioners, right? Which is the British Army's hospital for veterans.
Okay.
Right. So even today, if you see Chelsea pensioners, as they're known, in their traditional Chelsea pensioner uniform, it's a long red 18th century coat with big turn-back cuffs, and they still wear tricorn hats as part of their uniform. If you've got guys who still reside at the Chelsea hospital, when they turn out for a parade, they've got this great uniform. And of course, in Victorian times, when you were a middle class kind of person in Victorian times and you had a weekend, the kind of concept of weekends were invented in the 19th century as well. You had leisure time and you had time to spare in fashionable cosmopolitan Victorian London. You'd go out on a Saturday or a Sunday to go and see something of interest. So you might go and take in a play or go to the music hall, or you might go and see the inmates at Bedlam, the
Yeah,
mental
that was a
hospital,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, Bethlehem, or you'd go and pay a visit to the veterans at the London Hospital for Army Veterans at Chelsea. And so these guys are turned out on the weekends in their best uniform. And of course, many of these men have lost eyes, have lost hands or legs or whatever else, and um, they're supplied with kind of crude prosthetics to try and help their life be a little bit easier. And when you've lost an eye and you've got a gaping wound because you had your eye, you lost your eye in the Crimea or at Waterloo or wherever the hell it was, and there are people coming to see you who are kind of nice, genteel Victorian types,
And you don't
they
want to
don't
terrify
actually
them.
want
Yeah.
to. They don't want to look at your ghastly face. They've come to kind of patronize you because you're a poor veteran who's done terrible things. So they would cover up things like that, to do the absolute opposite of what a pirate wants to do. So there's some of these old boys would literally have a peg leg and some kind of prosthetic for a hand, but they've got this 18th century coat and all the rest of it. And I think that there's a very good chance that actually what happened was all of these things got used in illustrations of pirates, and kind of like fed that really early on. And of course, it all just, you can't stop it. It just gets into the mindset and off you go, and then you run away with it. By now,
Yeah.
it's there. That's what pirates are. In the same way that you get 75% of the pirate flags you think are proper pirate flags are not proper pirate flags, but they've been around for a long time, so people think they are. And it takes so long. And we know this. That's what it's like with the internet. Let me just think. I'll give you an example. So somebody put on Facebook that the Haitians were eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio, and then some kind of like bloke online, it's kind of semi-important kind of potential president of the most powerful country in the world, gets hold of this and spouts it out, and there are lots of people who are quite happy to believe it and counteracting that and going, but there isn't. And the person who said that actually she thought that's what happened said that didn't happen at all, and the cat was at home, but that's too late then. It's already gone. And so yeah, it's always an uphill struggle then as soon as something's out there. Nowadays, of course, it's a lot worse because the internet just kind of spreads it that much quicker. But
Yeah. It's just it makes people faster what they already do very well, which is mostly doing stupid stuff.
yeah, bless them. I mean, people individually on the whole are wonderful.
Yep.
Yeah, people put together, just no. It's
Yep.
no wonder I like to spend so much time in my shed.
No, I'm with you on that one.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, all of these things are myths, and you can only go by, yeah. Sadly, the evidence in front of us, and a lot of the time that evidence is lacking, not there at all. But but again, a pirate who is got a one-legged man or whatever it's great from a story point of view. You shouldn't those
Yeah.
kind of things. It's really difficult when I go and do pirate stuff in school with kids. We spend all this time talking about we wreck all their thoughts about pirates, and then we go, but it's fine. Stick it all in a story because it's just a story. But yeah, it's tricky kind of stuff.
Okay. So do you have any pirate shows or pirate movies that don't make you scream too much at the screen?
No, not one.
Okay.
Universally, they're crap. Um, and it just that's not fair, because the thing is, right, is I love Pirates of the Caribbean. I love the ride. I mean, the fact that movie came out based on one of my favorite rides at Disneyland, and the first one especially was so clever because, fans of the ride, you could sit there and go, look, that bit's that bit's on the ride, and that bit's on the ride, and they make great stories. So yeah, totally. Um, and yeah, so I love that. I love Cutthroat Island. It's a fantastic film. I mean, one of the biggest movie flops of all time from a Hollywood point of view, because it costs so much money. And
I
um,
believe I never really watched that one. Oh, okay. I'll have to fix that.
yeah, it was, but so, and the Pirates of the Caribbean films were huge successes, and even the later ones, and I mean, it's that kind of thing where, yeah, it's a drama. My friend Ed, I was telling you about, was one of the historical advisors on a couple of the Pirates of the Caribbean films, 2 and 3 especially. One of his books. This is one of his books. Ed is uh, the
Oh,
writer
nice.
of the only book about pirate flags in the world. He was writing his thesis, his PhD, and all the evidence, all the research he was doing, whenever he was looking for other stuff, but whenever he came across a reference to a pirate flag, he just kept record of it. And then after a while, he realized he'd actually got enough to write a book just about pirate flags. Ed was, yeah, the historical advisor on the Pirates of the Caribbean films, and the third one especially, which has got the big pirate fleet, and they've all got their different flags. And basically, he'd been asked to talk about. He basically said to the director of the film, right, these flags are real pirate flags. We know who they belong to. These flags are made up pirate flags. They're supposed to belong to one pirate or another, but they're not actually historical things at all, and these are complete toss. And well, of course, when you do historical advice for movies and TV, you're just there to advise. You're not there as kind of like, you don't get any say. So if a director likes a thing, it goes in the film, whether historically accurate or not. And I've done historical advice for shows, and I know loads of people in my world who've advised on all kinds of different things, and it can be quite depressing really after a while, because you're sitting there going, you're only really there to, I don't know, tick a box, really. And when Pirates of the Caribbean 3 came out, Ed got a lot of stick from a lot of people who were kind of like getting onto him about all the different flags and going, and he was very much a case of, you can advise, but they don't have to take your advice, So, and I play around with that a lot. My favorite flag up to a little while ago was this. Um, right, so
The classic,
it's an
okay.
icon. It's got to be one of the most famous flags. I'm still not sure why my son's name is on the screen. It's just got to be one of the most famous pirate flags of them all, right? It's supposed to be the flag. If you find that online, it will tell you that's the flag of the pirate John Rackham, Calico Jack Rackham. Okay, and I love that flag. However, sadly, it is not a thing. That flag, Calico Jack Rackham, was executed, I think, on the 19th of November, 1720. 1720. And he that flag first appears anywhere in a Dutch book in the 1960s, and is first actually kind of like attributed to Calico Jack Rackham in a Time Life magazine book published in 1978. So we know it's not a real proper pirate flag. Having said that, it might not be a real proper pirate flag, but I love it as a pirate flag. And whenever I do pirate events where there's a flagpole, I used to go. My business partner, my mate John, we used to go and do pirate events at a lovely little castle in Dartmouth Castle. We'd live in the castle for a week and do pirate events in the early summer for English Heritage. Really cool, smashing place.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Getting the keys to a castle is pretty cool in the first place. And and we'd always take the English heritage flag down and run a pirate flag up the flagpole because we're pirates, we're here, and I would always run that flag, Calico Jack Rackham's knot flag, up the flagpole, and take a photograph of it, and then post it online and tag my mate Ed into it because he knows that I know it's not a proper pirate flag, but he also knows that I know that it will really annoy him that he's flying, and I'm a big kid really, so it's a case of going right. So, and in fact, we got to the point where I didn't even bother actually getting the flag out and running out the flagpole. I just used to use the same photograph and tag him in it every time. It's quite rude to me now, actually, about that kind of thing. So yeah, it's but you know, it's an iconic thing, and it's there all the time. So, but sadly, no evidence of it at all whatsoever, that flag. But yeah, and it's cool, and it's the same. I mean, this is supposed to be Blackbeard's flag. If you
Is it
Google
the one with
Blackbeard's
the
flag,
two skulls? Yeah.
yeah, cool. Okay, so this is often usually portrayed as Blackbeard's flag, and while I'm nerding about flags, sorry everybody if you're watching this and you're thinking, oh God, he's going on about flags a lot. But this is turning into a Big Bang Theory. It's like instead of Sheldon with flags, it's Tim with flags, right? But anyway, so this flag, and of course there are no actual flags from the period surviving at all anyway, right? So we're only going by written descriptions in court records and the like. Anyway, so it's all a bit speculative. But this flag, which is a skeleton with horns, holding a sand timer in one hand, stabbing a bleeding heart with a spear in the other hand. And pirate flags are all about symbology and but what you've got going on is the fact that the skeleton represents death, and horns represents the devil, and they are different things. And one thing that pirates didn't do was mix their metaphors, right? So this doesn't happen. If you took that flag and got rid of all the horns on the head of the skeleton, it would actually be the flag used by a pirate called Ned Lowe and a couple of other guys who sailed with him because they sailed in concert, and all three ships used the same flag. But that flag with the horns never existed until the 1920s, and again isn't given to Blackbeard until the middle of the 20th century. And in actual fact, Blackbeard just used a skull and crossbones like the vast majority of pirates. But it's one of those ones that's definitely not a real flag, I'm afraid. And then neither is this. This is often supposed to be Henry Every's flag. And we have no idea what Henry Every's flag was, but bloody well isn't that. I'm afraid. It just totally isn't the thing. So
Okay.
now my favorite pirate flag.
What does that? What's that? Is like a skull with a bandana or a?
Skull with a bandana, and it's got got an earring as well.
Okay.
And look, we've already done the earring conversation. And there's another version of this that's got a tricorn hat on it as well. And in 1695, they weren't really a thing. They are by 1705, but not that you wear them on board a ship. So yeah, that's totally not Henry Every's flag, I'm afraid. But now my favourite pirate flag. Let's see if I can find my favourite pirate flag. This is my favourite pirate flag. Give me the option. Where's the share button? Here we go. And again, this is just my representation of it.
Whoa. Okay.
This that's kind of cool now. That one kind of is now my favorite. This is the flag of a pirate called Thomas Anstice. And I think about stuff when I'm kind of doing the history thing. I always like to think of the stories that go with these things, right? And in this case, it's that kind of thing going, well, it's a Union flag. You can notice it's not a modern Union flag because the Northern Irish cross is not in it. This is only the flag of the Union between England and Scotland. And there's a certain amount of going, right, okay, we need a flag, lads. We haven't got a flag. I want a bloody pirate flag. Well, we haven't got any black material. And you've got to bear in mind that sailing ship flags are enormous.
Yep.
Right? They're kind of, because they have to be seen from so far away that they are huge. So not having any black material or black paint. They got to the point where it was very much a case of going, right, well, what have we got? And it's like, well, we've got the British flag. Okay, that's cool. Make it look a bit piratey. And then I think what must have then basically happened was the fact the bloke who was told to make it look a bit piratey decided what he would do would be just to kind of
All of the grenades.
put some Granados on it, and that'll look cool. That'll do the job, won't it, boss? Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, don't worry about it. That's great. That's grand. So yeah, I think that's where that mostly comes from. So and so I love that as a story. So that's become definitely Tim's favorite kind of pirate flag these days. But yeah, pirate flags and pirate stories are kind of cool. I'm just trying to find the other one that I really like, which is a real proper pirate flag. That's
Okay.
got wiki. Here we go. Let's save that. Drag that over here. Look at me with all my 20th century kind of 21st century understanding of
So
stuff.
remind me, the default skull and crossbow thing. That's an official. It's not a pirate flag as such, is it? It's just
Well, no, well, I mean, the skull and crossbones as a. Hang on, let's just get rid of this one. Where are we? I have got so many tabs open now. It's ridiculous. So the skull and crossbones, of course, is the most common of the pirate flags, right? But it wasn't. Again, it's not a thing invented by pirates. It's the universal symbol of death. So the black flag is the most effective weapon that pirates have, because it's a weapon of terror. Right, so you use your pirate flag when you are hello, what's going on there?
when you're trying to be terrifying.
Yeah, you use your pirate flag when you're getting close to your enemy, and then at the right moment you put your flag up and you are hoping that they're going to surrender. That's the way it goes. And what happens there is, let's get rid of that off a minute. Didn't want that open. Yeah. Tim's sharing all kinds of things he doesn't need to share. Stop it, you foolish man. All right, there we go. Shit, that's bad. Ah, cool. Okay, so look, there's another pirate thing behind it. So yeah, so you put your flag up when you want to stop the enemy, when you want to stop a ship, and you hope that they're going to surrender. And the whole point of that is the fact that unless you're Ned Lowe or Charles Vane, who frankly were probably absolute psychopaths, most pirates are quite happy just to go on board your ship without doing any fighting, because fighting is noisy and messy and unpleasant and scary, and you're going to damage the enemy ship anyway. So it's a lot better than if they'll just surrender.
It's not good for business. Yeah.
So it's a weapon of terror. But the thing is it's always been a symbol of death. So one of the things you get around about, especially in the UK, in other places as well, in America, it's what we call a memento mori, right? Reminds you of your mortality. And you often get gravestones in Britain and in the States and in other places which have got a skull and crossbones on them. And the locals always refer to them as the pirate grave. Oh, that's the pirate grave, that is. That's where there are pirates being buried there. Oh, totally. And you're like, it's not.
I mean, it's also the symbol for poison. It's not like, yep, those are totally pirate drinks.
on a gravestone, it just means somebody's dead.
Yeah.
You know, somebody in here has died, and yeah, you can still find it today on bottles of poison and other kind of things. So it's a symbol of death. But yeah, it was universal use. So this is the flag that Blackbeard uses. Pretty much all of the flying gang, all the famous guys who hung out with each other in Port Royal at the time, used the skull and crossbones. It's by far the most common pirate symbol of the time, and of course, much later it gets used by submariners and all kinds of things. But I think my favourite flag, my other favourite flag, or the one that I really like, is this one, which is Bart Roberts' flag, because this is here we go. This is one of the flags of Black Bart Roberts. He used a number. Black Bart Roberts must have had a massive ego. He was, and he gets through a number of flags at his time. They're written about on different occasions, and I love this one because again, there's got to be a story about this flag, and I kind of like picture this scene of Bart Roberts deciding that he's bored with his old flag, and he goes to Dave, the flag maker, and he goes, "Right, Dave, I want a new flag." Dave's a bit fed up with him. And it was like it would be a case of going, right, all right, Captain, what do you want on this flag this time? And you're like, well, I want to be on the flag. And Dave would roll his eyes and go, what do you mean you want to be on the flag? I want to be on the flag, right? I want to be present on the flag. I want to be scaring people, right? Oh, okay, all right. I don't know how I'm going to do that. And I want to look scary. Right, okay. You want to be on the flag, yeah, and you want to look scary, yeah. Well, how am I going to do that then? I don't know. I put a sword in my hand, and yeah, I want to be dancing on the heads of my enemies. That'll do it. Right? Okay, no worries. Yeah, I'll see what I can do, Captain. Oh yeah, and by the way, Dave, um, I also I want you to put on the flag that I hate people from the Bahamas and from Martinique. What? Yeah, I really. I want you to get across. I want people to know when I'm out there and we're sailing. I want people from the Bahamas and Martinique to know that I'm an absolute badass and I hate them. He did actually have a real problem with the governor of the Bahamas. He called him. He writes a letter to the governor of the Bahamas because he refused to pardon some of his crew.
Okay.
And so yeah, he uses the C word in a letter to the governor of the Bahamas. So he really didn't like the guy. Um, and I can't help thinking poor old Dave, the flag painter, or Stitcher in this case, because we don't even know if the flags are painted or done in, applique. This poor bugger had to come up with a way of expressing how much his captain hates people from the Bahamas and Martinique. So ABH and AMH stands for a Bahamian head and a Martinican head. And so this is Bart Roberts stood on the skull of somebody from the Bahamas and somebody from Martinique. And again, I don't know how, and this is described by members of his crew in their court case. So we got quite a good idea that this is kind of what his flag might have looked like, or certainly what it was representing. And I can't help feeling sorry for people from like Barbados or Mauritius or whatever, because they might not have got the memo. It's like ABH. Is that a Barbadian head? Is that us? Oh crap! He's going to be really down on us because he doesn't. No, it's all right. He's fine. He hates people from the Bahamas. You're fine. You're from Bermuda. No worries. So yeah, it's a really cool flag.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know how what the thinking process was. I think the version you gave is as good as any, but why?
Yeah,
Basically.
well, because I think in some ways some of these guys had to have a huge amount. I mean, they must have been. Some of them must have been really charismatic.
For sure, yeah.
Some of them must have had, for them to have got away and stayed being commanders and being successful wrestlers. And Bart Roberts is the most successful pirate when it comes to number of vessels captured. He captures over 400 vessels in his career. Some of them are fishing ships, so they don't really count, fishing boats. But even so, he took over 400 prizes, which is a vast number. But and I think some of them were, they were probably lovely. They were kind of like loving themselves quite a lot, and success goes to your head, doesn't it? Really, and we can all think of examples of people who have got an overstated opinion of themselves for one reason or another.
Yeah, I mean, I figure if you to become a pirate captain, you need to have a certain amount of ego to begin with. You don't just go
Yeah,
in.
yeah, absolutely right. And for people to follow you and keep following you, you got to be lucky as hell. First of all, you got to know your stuff. I mean, when they elected captains, they didn't just choose their mates. They usually would choose the bloke they thought was most qualified for the
Oh, yeah, I
job.
mean, it's a question of survival at the end of the day. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. You need a guy who knows what he's doing. Otherwise, it's so yeah. I mean, so that kind of thing, you get to a point where it's yeah, it's interesting how you get these different kind of things and how but yeah, yeah, it's brilliant. So the flag thing is something that just keeps me going for ages because there's so many, and so many of them are absolute rubbish. But each flag, even the ones that aren't real flags, lead you into finding out about those pirates and finding out about some of their
yeah,
stories and various other pieces. So, Steve Bonnet is another great example. There's
oh,
if
yeah,
you
that's like
Google
a
Steve
midlife
Bonnet's
crisis if there
flag,
ever was one.
if you Google Steve Bonnet's flag, then you get a flag that totally isn't. It was made up in the 1970s. Oh, you asked me about TV programs and which ones don't make me shout. Our flag means death. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah,
That's
I've
it's
watched the first season. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So our flag means death. Yeah, it's just hilarious because actually some of the clothes in that are pretty good, and
all right.
um the representation of Steve Bonnet in that is quite humorous because he was a terrible pirate. He was rubbish. Most pirates they'd steal a ship and they kind of like make people invite people to come and join their crew, and sometimes they forced people to join their crew, and they go. Steve Bonnet buys a ship and hires a crew. He was a fairly wealthy farmer in America, and decided to have a go at being a pirate. And of course, he sails off and mostly encounters Blackbeard, who pretty much holds him prisoner. And yeah, for a while he's not doing anything at all, and he eventually takes a pardon because he was so crap that and he gives up being a pirate and goes back to live on land. And after a while, he decides to have another go. So he does it all over again. The second time around, he gets caught and gets put on trial. And at his trial, he reputedly, when asked by the judge, who said to him, you've been pardoned before and you went back to piracy. Why did you do that? He reputedly said, I did it to avoid my nagging wife. So
Okay.
which didn't really get him off. He still was executed. So from that point of
Yeah.
view,
I see that Dungeons and Chronics and Scatterbrain have joined us. Hi, people. So, just a question. Because when we were talking about flags, I was also thinking about pirate hunters. It's like
yeah.
pirate hunter goes and sees the flag and like, what the devil was that man thinking? But
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you kind of give it away. I suppose with flags, some pirates like to have their own individual flag because if you're being chased by bite robbers, there's a chance you might surrender
oh, yeah, absolutely.
quicker if you're being just kind of like pursued by Dave the pirate.
Pretty much, I
Um,
think that campaign training mentioned the Dread Pirate Roberts from The Princess Bride in the chat
yeah, yeah,
earlier,
Dread
which is
Pirate
literally
Roberts.
exactly
Yeah, yeah. It's all about reputation. So I think certainly from that point of view, and yeah, and again, of course, we get pirate hunters and Woodes Rogers, for example, who becomes the governor in the Caribbean, and he kind of like becomes the most hated person in the pirate world because he was a bit of a privateer to start off with, and he's patriot turned gamekeeper kind of thing. Um, and at the time, the Royal Navy wasn't really geared up for tackling pirates, where the main Golden Age of Piracy kind of kicks off because more than anything else, the Empire, the British Empire especially, is booming, and there's a period of so much international trade, and even the Royal Navy, which had been reduced in size because the War of Spanish Succession finished, and they'd laid off lots of they'd reduced the British Navy in size, and all of a sudden you get this kind of like case where you've got the seas become these fertile grounds for a few years where there is not enough navy to stop all these guys doing what they're doing. So yeah, you get individual pirate hunters who are employed as well to go out there. So Anne Bonny and Mary Read and Calico Jack Rackham were caught up with by a pirate hunter rather than the Royal Navy. And kind of meet their end there. Whereas historically, when you met the Royal Navy on the whole, you came off really badly. Blackbeard is caught up with by Lieutenant Robert Maynard and his two vessels, and his crew get caught and captured, and Blackbeard, of course, gets killed. Bart Roberts gets caught up with by the HMS Swallow, and he's killed in battle with that. I met actually interesting thing a few years ago. We were doing a pirate event in Pendennis at Cornwall, and what's really cool with the British Navy, and I imagine it's the same with navies of other nations as well, is that ship names get kept. It's like land regiments, and they have their standards, and they have all their honours on
Okay.
the standard British regiment. And when British regiments, even when the British Army have kind of like downsized and regiments have amalgamated, all their battle honours get shared on their flags. And in the Royal Navy, it's the same thing, you know. So you nowadays you might be sailing on a ship that has the name of a ship that's been around for 200 or 300 years, and there have been a number of different iterations of that.
Okay.
And we met the crew of HMS Swallow, which is now a coastal cutter. And we were chatting with them, and they didn't. A couple of them knew, but not all of the guys there knew that they were the crew of the ship, the descendants of the crew of the ship that caught Black Bart Robertson, you know, with famous pirate killers, which is it's kind of cool. It's like, you know, it's like, and chatting to them about the fact that, you know, you're now you know, and they tell us, yeah, we're a coastal cutter, and their main job is about kind of dealing with smugglers and pirates and that kind of thing. Nice how everything kind of goes
Oh
round,
yeah.
and how doing what I do, I get to meet these kind of people. It's
Oh yeah.
kind of cool.
That is an awesome part of it. Oh, I see that David joined us. Hi, David. Okay, so just to bring the ship around and go back to talking about games. Do you
Go
have
on in.
any good pirate games?
Good pirate games. I've written a number of. I'm known for writing ship rules. And yeah, I've played a couple. I've seen one that's on Kickstarter at the moment, actually, which I'm quite interested in. I don't need to play pirate games. I've got my own. I've got my own pirate rules called Scurvy Scum, which have never got past me writing some shoddy documents and bits and pieces. And I play 40mm. I've got 40mm pirates from Sash and Sabre, and I'm getting old. About 10 years, maybe longer. I kind of discovered 40mm figures. And I was kind of taken with them. They were bigger, and my eyes are going, and it's kind of like they're easier to paint. And there was a bit of the masochist in me found it really interesting because they're not as well supported as, you know, and as popular as 28 or 32mm figures or whatever. And so you have to root around and search for all these different ranges of figures. And yeah, I got into 40mm pirates. I've converted Playmobil pirate ships and for war game even. The most figures are from they come from Sash and Sabre and a couple of others. In fact, so much so with 40mm stuff, I got into. I have a Facebook page which is for 40mm wargaming, which is a very niche kind of thing, but it's pretty cool. Let's see if I can find some pirates. And so I have my own rules for 40mm pirates. Let's try and find a ship. It must be a bloody ship around here somewhere. Here we go. Download that, save it, stick it in there, stick it on there, pop back there. That will work really well if I can find me there. Oh, there we are. So this is one of my converted Playmobil pirate ships.
Ooh.
Nice model, nice figures. That is on a stand that goes on a little trolley. So these games, she's on this game was designed so we could play it in a big space, and you didn't need a board to play the ships. So you can we took that to Salute. Gosh, a long time ago now. Took on a Steve Bonnet.
Okay.
That is not Steve Bonnet's flag on the top of that picture. And it's so these were mounted on trolleys. So the ships were at waist height, and we sailed the ships around without having a water surface. So the only bit of water surface was the bit that's kind of like the ship's attached to on these boards, because you needed so much more space to play the game. It's not a regular kind of
Yeah,
tabletop
that makes sense.
kind of game, and it was a really cool concept. So I've got about 6 of those, And subsequently, of course, I've got a whole town as well for 40mm pirates. Um, and so this is my Caribbean town for 40mm pirates. But the problem is the fact you need a lot more storage space, and you need a bigger space to play in and various other bits and pieces. So it's a bit of a fool's errand. I've played 28mm pirates in the past, and now, like I said, there's this new game coming out called Port Royal, which is based around Port Royal in Jamaica was wrecked in uh, uh, an earthquake in about 1694. It was a den of evil and sin, and it was one of the most corrupt places on the planet. That's where all the pirates like to hang out. And of course, God's retribution was to wreck Jamaica with an earthquake. And this new game I've seen coming out has got loads of sunken buildings and bits and pieces. It looks a bit like Carnivale, but with pirates.
Okay.
So you've got wrecked buildings, ships, and things that are all sticking out of the water at odd angles, all kinds of stuff, which is pretty cool. But yeah, of course, there've been other kind of games in the last few years, and there's some really great ranges of figures. But the game that I kind of like was involved with that I haven't was, of course, this one.
Ah, yeah.
Warhammer Historic Legends of the High Seas, which again nowadays is hard to come by because it's some years ago that it was written. So I probably talked about this in the last video. Actually, it was written by a guy called Tim Kalinske.
Yeah, you had
Nice
mentioned it, yeah.
bloke. He lives in Arizona, a state well known for its piracy, deserts. It's well known for its deserts, and it's completely landlocked. And I was asked to get involved with Legends of the High Seas because I was known for writing. I wrote a game with a friend of mine. Actually, fairness, Matt did most of the writing. We wrote a ship game for Warhammer Fantasy Battle 4-ish, and then 3 or 4 or 5, kind of, I don't know, late 90s.
How does this game work? Because the movement was in the earlier Warhammer games, especially, are so limited that how do you
Yeah,
even model a ship movement?
it's really difficult because Matt and I wrote this game called Warhammer Ahoy. And I took it to Games Day. We won loads of prizes and bits and pieces of that. It was really cool. And then I was asked to jump in on Legends of the High Seas because they hadn't written any ship rules. And it was like, and they were kind of like, well, how do you have a pirate game that doesn't involve ships?
I don't know, drafts?
And
I don't know.
I think they'd come at it very much from the side of things of right. Well, we do the kind. There was a scenario that had been written where you'd assumed you got 2 ships side by side and they were just doing a boarding action. So
Okay.
there's a boarding action scenario, but the actual getting to the boarding action bit and all the cannons and everything else, none of that was there. And I was very much like, well, you can't. That's well, yeah. Several people at Warhammer Historical and mates of mine who worked for GW at the time were like, "This is daft," and they talked to me about it. I was like, "Well, yeah, that would be like writing a game called the Red Baron and not having rules for biplanes." Look, I've got this great idea for a Roman game. We're going to call it Circus Maximus, but we're not going to have any rules for chariot racing. Um, so I was kind of like asked to join in and get involved with Legends of the High Seas to write the ship rules, which was good fun. And there's actually a bit in there about making ships, which is mine as well. And it is difficult when you write a set of rules for ships. It's just a bit like a TV program or a movie. It's Hollywood. It's pretend it's a game. So you can't. I grew up sailing. My dad was into sailing. We all learned to sail. My family. I spent my early years and youth on the east coast of England, on the rivers and east coast of England. Yes, you're totally right. Pirates without boats are just bandits. Absolutely. Um, and so I'm into sailing, and but you get to the point where when you're writing a set of rules for ships, you have to just kind of like it's got to be far more forgiving because you're trying to play a game. So And I've actually my favorite set of ship rules I've written for playing in school with kids, where we have 30 kids in a class play. We have a ship chase where we just chase these ships up and down the school hall, models
And
on them.
and I'm assuming that you need to be able to teach them the rules there and then.
Yeah, I run the game. Me and John moves the ships around, and I can't run the game. We teach the kids the rules. So in half an hour, I've got these kids playing this game. But the thing, of course, is that with ship rules and with you, yeah, you have to have compromises. Is the word I'm looking for, because square sailed ships don't sail very well into the wind at all. You know, they really don't. You have to sail off the wind in many ways. You can't even get that close to them. They're not like modern sailing dinghies and yachts where you can sail really, just a few points off the wind and you get really very close to the wind and you can beat upwind, and which is still slower than sailing with all the wind behind, but you can actually sail into the wind. Whereas a lot of square sail ships, they just can't do that. So it's when you're writing rules for sailing ships to play a tabletop skirmishy kind of game that's action packed and fun to play, and you just have to chuck some of that out of the window. So it's about the size of your vessel. You end up with a number of charts. It's unavoidable. You can't. You have to have a chart about the size of the vessel and the direction of the wind and how much wind. Because you've got all these kind of things where we're going right. Well, how much detail do you need to go into to play a game? And you don't need to have the Beaufort scale for your ship game, but it does help to have a thing that goes, okay, it's windy, it's really windy, it's not very windy at all, there's no wind whatsoever, kind of thing. You need that level of abstract.
And also, when did you last scrape the barnacles of the
Yeah,
ship?
exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, all of these things, and yeah, and campaigns you can do that. Let's go and careen our ship. So you end up writing a set of rules that I like them to be fairly realistic, but you've got to have that balance. All wargaming rules are about a balance, I suppose, between realism on the one hand and playability on the other hand. Then it's about the numbers and the tweaking. When I was at Warlord yesterday, I was in a seminar that Rick Priestley was talking in, and he was talking about a lot of it is the dull bit of writing the rule system is the number crunching and the kind of you get your idea and that's really great and you write these cool kind of things and you just go they're getting the balance and how to play it. If you played a game where you can't sail your pirate ship into the wind and then you've got a system where the wind moves around and it completely knackers anything you're doing in the game at times. So yeah, it's very difficult because I like playing big scale stuff and skirmish kind of games. So even if I'm playing 28mm pirates, I want the ships to move and all the pirates to be important. And of course, the best way to play ship games actually is to play tiny scale, 1/300th or whatever they are, 1/600th, so your ships are this big.
So like those old Games Workshop Manowar games, I think it's about the
Yeah,
figures about.
yeah. When I made, well, I mean, when I made Man of War, which was I mean, Man of War was one of was their ship game back in the 90s and was all right until they pulled out just some of the most bizarre, strange looking things ever. But but when you're playing that, the crew aren't important. It's because they're not there. You've just got the ship model and you're just moving the ship model around. Then you can play slightly more accurate kind of games. You're playing over a much bigger scale and cannons shoot a mile. My guys, where are we? Let's go in here to get into when my pirate crew have got, and when we go out and do events, when we go to Pendennis in Cornwall, we're one of the only groups in the country who get to shoot these beasts. These are replica Sakers.
Oh yes.
Okay, so that's a 6 pound gun. And she's that'll shoot its cannonball. She would be capable of shooting a cannonball about a mile. It's only a 6 pounder. It's not a really big gun. And they've got, whereas you get early pieces, you get culverins at 17 pounds, you're shooting them, and cannon, shoot anything up to, depending on the period, certainly 24 to about 40 pound shot, shooting a mile and a half. And you don't get that on a 28mm wargaming table, because you're way too close.
Yeah, I always found it
But
strange with most war games. I mean, like typically the range for a rifle is 24 inches. That's like,
that's right, yeah. So it's and all of these games are really interesting with how the worst people, I think, to write war games rules for are reenactors who think they know everything about the period. People like me, who sit and complain about. And who aren't prepared to acknowledge the fact that a lot of war games rules are just so you can have a bit of variation in what you're doing. And actually, my favourite game in the world, Burrows and Badgers, has taught me that, because it's a game about anthropomorphic badgers, right, and hares. So you can't get hung up on the fact that the rules for crossbows and black powder weapons don't make sense from a reality point of view, because the person who's wielding it is a ferret, so it doesn't really matter. So what happens in that game then is you get to the point where we're going, okay, so and I've given Michael Lovejoy, the writer of this game, quite a lot of grief about some of his weapon stats and bits and pieces, because I shoot 16th century weapons. I know they're not very accurate. Weapons like Calivers and in Burrows and Badgers, Caliver gets a bonus for being an accurate weapon, which is utter nonsense. And loads as quickly as a crossbow, or which loads as quickly as a longbow, which just isn't a thing. But in the end, what you've got is these series of weapons that all give you different modifiers, so there are different reasons for choosing this weapon over that weapon, kind of thing. But yeah, bloody picky reenactors picking out all these things, and historians are going, "Oh, I think you'll find." But it doesn't work like that. And you go, well, yeah, it doesn't matter because look, that's being shot by a badger. So who cares? It's just a game, man. So yeah, writing rule systems, and whenever you write rule systems, I mean, it's like in Legends of the High Seas, there were 3 different factions that you could play. You could play pirates and Royal Navy and privateers. And the difference between a privateer crew and it's just a name and a couple of little tweaks, because actually when it boiled down to it, pirates and privateers, and I think there was, we ended up writing some other stuff for other kind of factions. It was just like, well, yeah, no, they're just blokes in a ship with cannons and muskets and
I remember reading, I think it was the US Navy's War Games Research Institute.
yeah,
In the, I want to say the 30s, might have been the 50s. So they put out their rules, right, for the training
yeah,
of officers and so on. And a destroyer was destroyer, whether it was American, whether it was British, whether it was Korean, whatever. A destroyer is destroyer. This ship is this ship, regardless of nationality, whatever.
yeah.
And the manual said at the bottom of this table is like, if you want more detail, you can buy one of the war games rules produced for civilian use. Which
Exactly.
it's kind of it always struck me as kind of weird. It's like why do civilian versions need more detail than the ones they use for training officers, kind of thing. It's
And of course, it depends what you're trying to get out of your game, and even when you're training people, if it's about maneuver at sea, then that's the kind of, yeah. And I this is it. I mean, when I'm writing rules, I like to bring a little bit of reality into it. So and sometimes I'll be told, oh, the sailing rules, so we're not going to use those because they're a bit challenging. Well, that's the bloody point. That's the point of being, of playing a ship game, because the difficulties of being at sea and the vagaries of, and we've reduced everything to its basic kind of like um, abstractness anyway. So instead of measuring the wind speed in knots and then having some kind of logarithm chart that calculates the number of masts you've got and whether you're flying your top gallants or not and various other bits and pieces, you have to reduce it to various bits of, to the point of going, right, well, your sail value is 4 and it's very windy. That means you can do this. But I still like to have that certain feeling of ships maneuvering each other and actually trying to get across. I mean, it's that classic thing, and sometimes they're really well done. Master and Commander, not a pirate film, but when you're talking
Mhm.
about films that you really like, you don't get cross at. I don't get cross at Master and Commander very much. It's a very good representation of ships at sea, and especially when you get that kind of raking your enemy by sailing across the stern of your enemy ship and firing your guns all the way down the length of the ship. That's absolutely devastating. And I think trying to represent that on a tabletop, so you're outmaneuvering your opponent, so you can get, you sail across the end of your ship, and but of course, wargaming tables and war games means that it's staggered. I go, you go, stop,
Mhm.
start, and various other bits and pieces. And again, when you're playing a 28 millimeter, a big scale game, 28, 32, 40, you have these things going, right, okay, I'm moving ships and I need to move the blokes around on the ship. Do I move the blokes around before I move the ship, or do I move the ship first and then the bloke? And if the ship moves, do the guys count as moving? And then, yeah, and it can get, super complicated. And in the end, you just have to have a rule and fix it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's too complicated, then it's no fun to play. You
Yeah.
have to hit that sweet spot.
And for me, the thing in the end is, and the interesting thing with Pirates is that I run out of ideas pretty quickly. There's some nice scenarios in there, and other games have got them, but actually, it's it's one of those game systems where you have to sit there and think, when you launch into a new game, certainly I do nowadays, you have to sit there and go, how much playability is there in this game? How much am I going to play it? How easy will it be to write scenarios? How many scenarios are out there? It's like Wild West games, right? And I've got a huge 40mm Wild West town. I've built a couple of Wild West towns in my time. 28mm one, and I kind of like with for Legends of the Old West. Um, and yeah, I sold all that off, and then stupidly I went and built this 40mm town because I discovered 40mm figures and 40mm cowboys, and they're O gauge as well. So there are lots of and it was cool, and I've got these. But actually, when you boils down to it, right, playing Wild West games, you do a bank robbery, right? You do a shootout, high noon kind of thing in the middle of the street. There's a bit of a kind of rumpus. It all kicks off in the saloon. You do a jailbreak or stop your mate getting hanged. You're kind of done playing that, and it's a bit like that with kind of pirate games. And when you look at new things, so one of the reasons why I like playing Judge Dredd is the fact that it's small scale, and there's 50 years nearly of source material of stories that you could turn into,
And
scenarios that
there's a
you
lot
can
of more
play.
variety in things that can
Yeah,
come. Yeah.
so that's the kind of game that I kind of like. Go, yeah, I can buy into that because there's loads I could get out of this. We were chatting with my friend Ted today about the Batman game that came out a few years ago. And it's like, how many games to play Batman, the tabletop game? First of all, I'd have to have a tabletop that looked like Gotham, right? So big
Okay.
building,
That's
top,
that's something I can't get over still because it is a massive investment just to get into a game.
exactly. Especially the way I like to play things, which is have the gangs painted and build all the scenery before I even roll any dice.
Yeah, if I'm testing out a game, I'm perfectly happy to play it with blocks of cheese if I have to.
Yeah. And then you get to the point and go, right, well, when I've played a couple of games with that bunch of guys, what am I going to, sometimes there are beautiful miniatures and great systems, and you go, but I'm going to spend an awful lot of money and time and not get a great deal of playability out of this.
Yeah.
And every now and then you have to be practical and pragmatic, which war gamers tend not to be very good at being, actually, are we? When we all consider our piles of opportunity uh, that are in the cupboards. I've had a clear out recently. I've got a whole bunch of stuff to move on and be realistic about, like Kill Team box sets that I bought over the last 2 or 3 years. Going, oh yeah, that'll be great. No, I'm about to do. No, I'm not. Warhammer Quest, Blackstone Fortress. Yeah, no, that's just sat there. Yeah, all kinds of other bits and pieces. Every now and then you have to be, sensible and go, right, I need to clear some space on my shelves so I can fill it with other useless shit that I'm not going to do anything with for 4 or 5 years. And then I'll recycle that as well. You know, I'm having one of those modes.
It's the
So
circle of life. Yeah.
absolutely, the circle of war game is like it's either that or you just drown in all that stuff. And then, as a war gamer, of course, you are in danger of passing away with all of this hobby stuff. And then you have to make sure that one of your friends is going to come and step in for you and make sure that all of your hobby stuff gets sold for what it's actually
Yeah.
worth, rather than what you told your wife it cost.
That's always critical. Uh, yeah, and I mean the drowning in plastic thing. That's literally one of the reasons I have not bought a 3D printer yet because my impulse control is not good. It would not support
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Cool. And that's a really cool question. What's the difference between a pirate and a buccaneer? Okay, thanks for that. Um, part of it is time. Buccaneers are kind of like around, but piracy has been around ever since man sailed ships across seas. Other men, bad men, sailed in ships after those first ships, took stuff off them. Um, but when we think of pirates and we're thinking of Jim Ladd and all that kind of thing, we're thinking of a really short period, which is what we tend to call the Golden Age of Piracy, which is really 1695 to 1725. It's a 30-year period. Buccaneers are around a little bit before that. They're in the Caribbean. They get their name, first of all, from the French word for bacon. And Buccaneer comes from the word boucanier, which means kind of like suppliers and producers of bacon. On Tortuga and on a couple of the other Caribbean islands, there are a bunch of French um, uh, expats, French people there were French colonies, and they were living on these islands, and there were these wild pigs that lived there, and they would kind of like harvest the wild pigs and get them and kind of like cut them up and smoke the meat and preserve the meat, and then they would supply French and Spanish ships in particular with fresh food as they sailed past on their way to either to Spain or back to Middle America. And what they would do is they tended to go out and meet the Spanish ships in small boats and canoes, and they would trade from these things. And then and then the English got involved, of course, and then it all went to hell in a handcart. But then they started to realise that they were sailing, they were getting out near these boats, and they could actually try and sell them bacon, or they could just paddle out there, get alongside these boats, and kind of like attack them and steal things
With
from
the guns they had that they used to hunt
them.
the pigs with. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And then we get this earlier period, and then we get Buccaneers. So that's their origins. And then really the Buccaneers are land-based forces. So if you find out about Henry Morgan, who's considered to be a famous early pirate, and the rum is named after him and the rest of it. Actually, most of what they did was on land. And he had armies of hundreds of men, and they would attack Spanish forts and towns and various other bits and pieces. So Buccaneers, well, there was a comment earlier about pirates without ships are bandits. Well, actually, in the late 17th century, second half of the 17th century, Buccaneers are really a lot of the time they're pirates on land, attacking Spanish kind of like assets in the Caribbean and in South America, but they're not out roving around on ships and attacking other ships as much. They're attacking land targets. Cool. I think that
Nice.
kind of answers that question. I hope that's kind of, is that all right? Kind of works. So yeah, and now of course the problem is the fact that all of those names have just been mashed into one, and we tend to talk about
Yeah.
buccaneers and pirates and corsairs and everything else, and especially because the novelists like to use different words to make their writing sound more interesting, and they sex them up, and we've kind of mashed all those kind of concepts together. But they were different sea-bound criminals.
So I mean, the ones I'm really not sure about are the difference between corsairs and privateers because I think they're pretty much the same thing, no?
Yeah, I mean the corsairs, they don't really meet Golden Age piracy, and the corsairs around the Mediterranean
Yeah, pretty
corsairs
much. Yeah.
are about for hundreds of years, and on a number of occasions we get Europeans who end up joining them and turning to Islam and then getting called Redbeard and that kind of thing. Um, but they are as much about raiding, landing, going ashore and landing and attacking things and stealing stuff. They're more, I think, Corsairs in many ways have probably got more in common with Vikings than they
Yeah,
have with, well, yeah,
yeah,
because
from that point of view, yeah,
Vikings
yeah.
Vikings just sail out in their longships, but they weren't actually getting involved in many actions at sea. The ships take them to a place, they go and raid stuff and steal stuff and then sail away again. Certainly, the English experience with corsairs coming to southern England and to Southern Ireland, they were coming out and grabbing people and taking them away as slaves. So they're attacking towns, villages on the south coast of Cornwall and Devon, like Mousehole and Penzance and various other places like this, and around the southern coast of Ireland. And they're making landfall and they're marching on places and they're grabbing people and taking them away for slaves as much as anything else, which is a far more Viking-y kind of way to behave than ship to ship combat. I'm no expert on Mediterranean corsairs. But that's my kind of like reading on certainly from a
No, I think you're right, and I hadn't considered it that way because, yeah, the Corsairs have a lot of land-based activities, whereas a privateer is mostly a private contractor to attack other ships. Yeah, I think it makes
yeah
a lot of sense.
yeah. So pirates and privateering is about ship to ship actions more than anything else. Which is why it was really weird, right, having a set of wargaming rules with no rules about ships. And everything you're doing was going on land. It's kind of, oh, okay. But yeah, so and by then Pirates of the Caribbean have been a thing, and lots of Pirates of the Caribbean is set on land because ships are bloody expensive to film with, one way or another. It's a lot easier to have a set that is the port and is a tavern and is a that kind of thing. Um, so yeah, it's yeah. I've only just made that link myself that Corsairs and Vikings have got quite a lot in common from the way they behaved point of view. And people often describe Vikings as pirates. Um,
Eh,
but Vikings, and to me, Vikings aren't pirates because they are not setting out to attack shipping.
yeah,
Piracy is about attacking other ships. It's not to say that Norse people didn't, there weren't ship to ship actions, but actually a lot of the time it wasn't, you know, a thing they went out and did. You don't go and attack other ships when you're a Viking. You're sailing out of Denmark or Norway and you're sailing to Holy Island off the Northumbrian coast because it's a kind of like a stationary target full of priests walking around in sandals who are all not going to put up a fight. And so modern guys are obsessed with both pirates and bacon are actually getting into historical reenactment. Well, hell yeah, because bacon is what makes the world go round, isn't it? Frankly, and but yeah, it's easy to be obsessed with pirates. It's yeah, he is talking from personal experience. Yeah, yeah, this is absolutely true. Yeah, um, I'd say it's a healthy obsession with piracy with me though. It's
and bacon. Bacon is also a healthy obsession.
and bacon's a very healthy obsession. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, nothing, everything's made better with bacon. Blimey. Um, and and I feel sorry for. You can tell that's the case because of the number of vegetarians who like to eat bacon, fake bacon, because they miss the bacon, even if they've started off and been a vegetarian their entire life, And I feel sorry for cultures that don't eat pork at all because they don't know what they're missing, frankly.
That's
And
very sad.
I'm all for live and let live, and everybody do your own thing because lots of cultures who don't eat bacon means there's more for us, which is all good. So yeah, but yeah, but I mean the bacon thing is more than anything else from a buccaneer point of view. It's well preserved, it's dried, it's kind of like salted, it's lasts longer on your ship. Oh, we're back to eating on board ships. Look. Um, we've gone round and round in circles this evening. It's been quite good fun.
Okay, yeah, but since we have hit that subject, think we should be wrapping up soon, but what about telling us about, I don't know, pirate food?
Pirate food.
Pirate food.
Right, okay. We tend to just call it food. Um, you're welcome. Yeah, well, I mean, we were talking earlier about life on board ships in in the age of sail, and it just must have been bloody grim, frankly. You leave port, you've got limited ways of keeping food fresh for a very short amount of time, and in no time at all, you are on dried, salted rations, and the amount of variation of variety would have been next to nothing. You're eating ship's biscuits, which are basically just kind of flour and salt that you're hoping is going to get soaked in something and added some flavor to. And while we're on all of that, I think, there's a good chance that if pirates did keep parrots, which they didn't, you'd keep your parrot around for when all the other food ran out, and then it was kind of like, come here, Polly, because it's quite a good way. I mean, on sailing ships, you did keep some animals. Certainly, Navy ships would have chickens in cages and might have even a goat or two on big ships for producing milk and the like. And keeping an animal, sometimes keeping a few animals and fodder might actually be easier and a better way of keeping that meat fresh than it was to actually store that meat. Although, and there certainly were instances when, I mean, I reckon they would have eaten a lot of fish. A lot of pirates were ex-fishermen. They had that kind of like skill and expertise. And in some cases, we know that some not great pirates or not successful voyages, they were attacking fishing vessels and taking tackle and fish. So Anne Bonny and Mary Read, the famous female pirates who, like I said earlier, the stories are nowhere near are much cooler than the reality. And out with Jack Rackham, one of the prizes they took was a fishing vessel which had they stole £6 worth of fishing tackle and a load of fish. So they would have ate quite well. And we know, it wasn't uncommon to catch sea turtles and put them on your deck and turn them upside down. And you keep them alive, but you keep them up on the back of their shell so they can't get away and they're immobile. And then you got fresh meat. So fresh food was a real problem. And in those days, they hadn't really worked out about things like scurvy. The idea of having vitamin-rich kind of like foods like limes and lemons and things and to help prevent scurvy doesn't really happen until the Napoleonic period and a bit beyond. So in the 18th century, in the early 18th century, scurvy was still really quite a kind of a problem if you're at sea for a long time. So yeah, it must have been quite a miserable kind of thing, really. It's half rations and angry people and that kind of thing. So yeah, again, another reason for not wanting to be actually alive at the time on a sailing ship of any bloody kind, frankly.
Yeah.
I'm
Time
going
telescope
on a
good, time
cruise.
machine no.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going on a cruise next year to the fjords, and it's one of those kind of like all inclusive. That's the kind of ship that I like to be on these days, where
But, okay, so I think we're going to have to wrap up here soon. But Tim, thank you so much for this. It's been a blast talking to you. The information was great, and it's always really enjoyable to talk to you. It's been a great pleasure.
Been an absolute pleasure. I mean, it's that kind of thing. It's quite nice to not just talk about toy soldiers. Actually, I mean, not that I have any problem talking about toy soldiers and making models and like that kind of thing. It's what I do. It's what I am. But the piracy thing and all the other history stuff, and it's I just find that all of these things in my life are just kind of intertwined, and actually it's kind of cool because the pirate stuff that we do, that I try and do, is immersive and we try to have events where we try to provide as much information and experience as we can to people who come and see us about life in the 18th century, and part of that is about building a world. So the funny thing starting doing Magrathea Builder Worlds, however many years ago there was now, I mean, blimey, the video channel started during the pandemic, which is 4 years ago now.
Oh yeah,
I'd
lovely.
been doing, I'd been doing, I'd had a Facebook page for a couple of years before that. Um, the interesting thing about that and choosing this name, Magathir Builder Worlds, and being a kind of like nerdy reference to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is actually that
Yeah, especially
all of
going to see the fjords now.
yeah, exactly. I'll go to the fields, yeah, and go meet Slightly Dark Fox. Very good, like it. I everything that I do is now about building worlds, imaginative worlds or immersive worlds. So whether they are immersive experiences that people can come and take part in, and we're working on loads of stuff for next year now, in for actually for real, from from a reenactment point of view and a historical point of view, sometimes a fancy point of view, or whether that's building worlds that I can play out on the tabletop with my friends, or whether that's immersing kids in schools into a world so they can improve their writing and get an understanding, write stories about it. It's actually kind of like the whole phrase kind of sums up pretty much everything that I do these days. So it's kind of cool. So I don't see a lot of difference between talking about pirates and then the tabletop. All these different things fuel one thing leads into another. So yeah, it's
Oh
pretty
yeah.
cool.
So once again, thank you so much, and I'm glad we could actually finish our conversation today.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, well done, you. You
Yeah, and flogging the electricity people up early rate. But actually,
absolutely.
we do have a last question for you. Maybe we can take it from Sir Capo.
How rich? How rich could make it in the pirate life? How most pirates don't make it very rich at all. Um, we've got a few documented pirates we know made vast amounts of money. Henry Every made we can't really put a value on it, but probably in today's money millions. And he disappears from the record. Richard Taylor at the end of the Golden Age of Piracy does likewise, and he buys a pardon and buys a plantation and becomes a very successful. Well, we don't know how successful, but he certainly becomes a businessman, a plantation owner, and a merchant. But most pirates, they don't seem to have made an enormous amount of money out of it at all. And in fact, most of them just meet a grisly end. When you start listing Golden Age pirates, Blackbeard died in combat, got his head cut off. Bart Roberts, throat blown out by a cannonball fired by HMS Swallow. Charles Vane, caught and executed. Calico Jack Rackham, caught and executed. Anne Bonny and Mary Read died in prison, probably in childbirth. Ned Lowe died, caught and executed. William Kidd, put on trial and executed. Black Sam Bellamy and his entire crew, bar 6 guys, drowned when their ship, the Widder, sank off Cape Cod in Massachusetts. And the list goes on and on and on. Most of these guys met grisly ends one way or another. Some of them took pardons and gave up being pirates at all. And on the odd occasion, you'd get the king would issue a proclamation announcing that you could give up piracy if you wanted to. Famously, in the Act of Grace in 1698, I think it was, William's Act of Grace, which offered pardons to pirates, did say you can hand yourself in at this time and this place, and we'll let you off unless you are Henry Every or William Kidd, which is coming after you. But that didn't always work out, because actually there's no record of any man handing himself in the Act of Grace at that period who was let off and was given a pardon. Every single man who handed himself in thought he was going to get a pardon, got put on trial and executed.
Ooh.
So, which was frankly bang out of order, but I mean, great way to. So yeah, most pirates meet a grisly end fairly early on, and very few of them, I think, actually really got to benefit from that. They were living the dream; they wanted to get it and attain it, but very few of them actually make a great deal of money at all. Um, it's a lot safer being a pretend pirate in the 21st century. Trust me.
Okay, and with that, thank you so much again, Tim. And thanks everyone for watching. Have a great week coming up, and see you around.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. See you soon.
Bye.
We'll have to have a
Bye.
chat about sword fights at some point.
Oh, absolutely. Just let me know. Okay. Bye, everyone.